Hey everybody, welcome to Porn Free Millennial. My name is Mac. I will be your host. So this is the first ever podcast I've made. It's kind of crazy. This is something I've been thinking about for quite some time, and that will be a little bit of the theme of today's show. Today's episode, number 1, is called Actions Speak Louder Than Words. But before we get into the theme of the show, I did want to just do a quick introduction, a little bit about me. So my name is Mac. I'm 31, from Colorado. As you can see here, I am sitting actually in an RV that I purchased 2 months ago. I'll probably talk a little bit about that more as some episodes, come out. But yeah. Right now I'm actually getting ready to go on my first off-grid adventure. I do work remotely, so I'm really looking forward to seeing nature and being out there and being able to have that work-life balance. So with that being said, that's a little bit about me. Really the driving force behind getting a podcast going was actually a divorce that I went through almost 2 months ago. Pretty tough divorce. Someone that I was married to for 5 years. Someone that I still love very much. But porn and how I handled it, of course, because I have responsibility. It really did affect our marriage in quite a negative way. And that's part of the reason why I'm starting the podcast. And why I've decided to come out and share a little bit about my story. Because, otherwise, going into marriage and in our relationship before that, it seemed on the surface, and at least to me and to her, that, we were that couple that would, kind of be the ones that would grow old together, right? And, little did I know, and little did she know really that, my relationship with porn really got in the way of that. It actually undermined it quite a bit. And, my inability to really realize, how big of an issue this was, ended up being just a little bit too late for us, unfortunately. So, that's really kind of a big reason why I started this podcast. With the podcast, I also started a YouTube channel. I started a TikTok channel just to reach out to people. I do not look at the shorts because I think that is kind of jumping in the deep end with sharks. But I do think it's a great platform, I think, to reach out to people and spread a message. And really the message is, if you have any inkling in your head or ever have that, hey, maybe porn's not like healthy. Maybe it's not something that's, good for me. Maybe it's something that, I've been in a relationship before and it's caused issues. It could even be, I don't really want to do anything today. It's Saturday, it's beautiful outside. I'd rather stay inside and look at porn. There's a lot of different ways I think we interact with porn, or we have, men and women really in our lives. And, if you're listening to this, I'm sure something kind of brought you in and piqued your curiosity. So, I hope, through the podcast, through social media, I also have a Substack channel where I'm actually getting back into my creative, kind of my creative passion of writing, a little bit, through that, hopefully you can find words of encouragement. I plan in this podcast, in my videos, in my writings, really to share, parts of my life, parts of my story that, could apply to you, because I think, I've experienced porn, as a child, as a teenager, as a young adult, growing into a marriage, going into relationships, and then actually, seeing the marriage end. I'm not one of those stories, there's other podcasts I've listened to, other coaches I've worked with that, hey, like, we got through it. Our marriage is great now. Unfortunately, that's not my story. My marriage, failed. It ended. It's really tough to swallow that pill, but, I kind of want to be that person, that can be on the other side of the fence, for people in relationships, or, maybe someone that's single, that's, wanting to get in a relationship or, looking, into the future and, hoping they can find that person. I hope I can kind of be that person maybe in the back of your head just saying, hey, look out for this. You might want to, have a different viewpoint going in and looking at your relationship with porn, if you've ever had it. It could be something, that you think is maybe not much of an issue and that you can handle it pretty well. I think there's a bunch of different spectrums of how people interact with it. I think for myself, actually, it was called an addiction by an actual therapist. Oop, bumped the camera. That might happen a few times. It's actually called an addiction. I did go to see a sexual addiction therapist. I did see counselors, porn recovery coaches. I've been in men's groups for that. I've been in men's groups for church as well, where I've shared my story and I've talked to others about it. So I think I do have some experience, in different fields and talking to different people from walks of life and how it's affected them. So, I feel like I have some wisdom I picked up along the way, at my age, hence the name millennial. And I think I could share it with you. And I think, I'm in recovery right now. 3 months in, close to 100 days of being completely sober from porn and masturbation. I'd say been on the recovery road now for 4 years. And recovery, I think, at least how I would define it, you're going north. You're not going south. You might have some bumps. You might have some hiccups. You might have some delays, some setbacks, right? But you pick yourself back up and you keep moving forward, keep going north because down the road, someday you're going to get there to where it's just not going to be a part of your life. It's almost like something like in your appetite just kind of changes. You're like, this doesn't really taste that good anymore. I don't really need this in my meal. Kind of like me with some sorts of food kind of give me stomach aches. I don't really eat them anymore. And you know what? I don't really miss them, if they were giving me that much pain. So, that's just a little intro. I believe just, sharing just, why I'm starting this podcast, why I'm talking to you now. That's just a little bit of a background. I do have a few metaphors that I want to share with you and analogies about words, maybe not having the same meaning as actions. First of all, kind of starting at a young age. That's where I'm going to start. Just picture a garden, okay? Like picture a garden if you've ever gardened before. Before my divorce, I built a bunch of raised bed gardens. I was growing a bunch of vegetables and fruit, and potatoes are really fun to grow, by the way, if you can grow them in your area. But I really got into it. It was a really big passion of mine. I just loved seeing things like come to life. And I love seeing like, hey, like this can actually like produce and provide, sustenance. And what I learned about gardens, right, is you got to make sure like the soil is good. You got to make sure, in my case, I looked for, organic soil, locally sourced. I wanted to make sure that, when I'm growing vegetables that they're not going to be like, radioactive when I eat them. They're not going to have pesticides in them and, things that actually might cause some health concerns down the road. So you want to have good soil. You also want to have quality seeds. So like, what are you putting in the soil? Like, what are you trying to grow? The more quality seeds you have, right? The better nourishment, like the better plant, the plant life. I would say the vegetable quality, the fruit quality, it's going to maybe taste a little bit better, right? You might be able to yield more. And then you need water, right? You need water to be able to start the process off. You need something to kick it off. I would say water is pretty similar to like action. You need something to be a catalyst for the growth. And then you gotta be able to look over your garden. You gotta be able to be a good steward of it, right? Because if you just let a garden go, which is actually what the garden looked like, when my wife and I originally bought the house, was there was actually a shovel buried in the garden. So we dug a shovel out of the garden with a shovel. Explain to me that one. I don't know how that worked, but it happened. So. But anyways, I digress. It definitely had to do a lot of work on the garden. It took a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, I would say. But it ended up turning out really nice, and I was really happy with it. Now, why I bring up a garden is, and with like porn, is the way I see it is when you're like a little kid, maybe that's like when you first experienced it. When I experienced it, I would say I was around 10 years old. And when I say porn, I don't want to go into super detail and in these talks, podcasts and videos, I'm going to really work to, not provide any kind of detail, like triggering kind of content. Because at least what I've learned through going to groups, talking with other guys is, when you're sharing your experiences, it's kind of more like what's the theme of it? Like, like it's kind of like more like the why. Like why are you maybe turning to this to solve for maybe like if you're feeling depressed or you're bored, you're just not getting things done, you're not being productive, and maybe that's why you're going to porn. But like the actual content itself, normally is just a no-go because you just don't want to trigger someone else, give someone else an idea. You never know. But I'll just say, I was, saw nudity, and I wanted to see more. I was a little kid at 10. Didn't quite know, what it was all about. But of course, you're a kid, you see nudity, and, I don't blame anyone, right? For anytime someone sees nudity, it's probably going to cause some kind of reaction, right, in the body and the mind. And I think at that age, you don't really have like those guardrails. I never really felt like I had the guardrails. A lot of it was just so secretive that, it's like I can't blame the parents that they had probably no idea, right? And that's probably like a lot of parents, and just to share too, I don't have any kids. So anytime I talk about like parents and kids, I'm not talking from experience, but I could only imagine that, what goes on these days with kids' phones. But anyways, so basically, your kid, you experience, this is like when the garden, when you're a kid, I would say like those are like the most like innocent years, right? That's like when the garden is like getting ready for like the seeds to be planted. That's like when the garden is looking like, organic. It's looking genuine. It's just looking clean, right? Like kind of like a clean slate garden. Now, I think porn, when the seeds start to sprout, right, and you start to see the leaves come out, I think porn initially, for like a kid or an adult, like someone that's like kind of first being introduced to it, it may seem like it's like that vegetable you planted or that fruit, or maybe that's like that flower. Because typically, like weeds, that's kind of how they work. Is they look like they try to replicate like their environment. So the metaphor or the analogy, I sometimes mix those words up, is I think porn's the weed, right? But like many weeds, it might look like a flower. Take some kind of action to realize that it's not a flower, it's not a vegetable, it's not a fruit in your garden, it's a weed. And when that happens, it could happen at any stage, really, for anybody. I think for me, when I went to Catholic school growing up, I don't really identify as a Catholic anymore, more non-denominational Christian. But when I grew up, it was very much like, hey, if you look at this stuff, like, it's a cardinal sin, which I was like, what is a cardinal sin? Why is that any different from anything else? Maybe some of the Catholic viewers, if you're listening, we can dive into that, in the comments, or you can send me an email. But I think for me, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm screwed. Like I'm done. And you have that guilt, the Catholic guilt, right? The shame, all that. So I think that's when I first started to realize, but it felt like it was kind of more like the punishment. It was kind of linked more to the punishment and being caught, actually more than just kind of thinking about it and be like, is it really okay to like look at somebody that way? Just for an endless amount of time, endless amount of searches just at your fingertips. Is that like really like a healthy thing for me psychologically? Is that a healthy thing for me emotionally? Those thoughts don't really go through your head, and they sure aren't taught like in Catholic school, that's for sure. It's very much like, don't do that, because if you do that, you're going to go to hell. Don't think that's the best technique, in my opinion. But, growing up, so weeds, right? So I would say that, there were a lot of weeds going on in my garden. And of course, there's a lot of vegetables too, right? You can't discount all the great things, right? But what I would say is, it seemed like porn just had an attachment to everything. It had an attachment to like my relationship with my family. It had an attachment to sports. It had an attachment to like when I started to like girls and date girls. It's always kind of in my mind. It's just kind of in the back there. It's like a dark cloud, just something a little bit hovering over you. I've kind of explained it before. It's like you're staring someone in the eyes and you just can't quite, it's not quite like you're not quite okay. Maybe you're not quite telling the truth to somebody. I always usually kind of think that when I would like say hi to like my grandma and grandpa or other family members, it just kind of felt like I was just like a phony, like I was hiding something. Like you go to the garden, you look at it, and you're like, hey, like this is a beautiful garden, but like underneath some of the vegetables, there's just a bunch of weeds. And that's how I felt. I think since 10. I think all the way up probably to about 3 to 4 years ago, I just kind of felt that way. It just felt like there was something hanging on me, hanging on my conscience. A lot of weeds per se in the garden. So where am I going with all this? Well, I think actions speak louder than words, because at some point you're going to realize that you have weeds in your garden. And at some point that's going to be affecting something pretty important in your life. It could be affecting your marriage. It could be affecting your productivity. It could be affecting like your mood. It could be affecting, your outlook on life. There's a lot of, I think, different points of time where you would notice, like, I've got weeds in my garden and I need to get these weeds removed. Now, kind of brings me to my next point. Okay, so you want to remove the weeds. That's awesome. That's really good. I think if you're on this listening to this podcast still, I think you have that in your mind. You're like, hey, I got some weeds. Like, I need to get them out. Well, that kind of brings me to the next segment. So once I started to realize I had weeds, I would say probably like in high school and college. Okay, I'll pull them out. Pull out the weeds, right? Hey, we're done. Hey, they're out. Got them out. Wrong. They're still weeds. Weeds are so hard to get rid of. And you're not going to be able to get rid of weeds with, you don't want to put pesticides in your garden. You don't want to do other things that, might be just as harmful to remove those weeds. You really got to kind of roll your sleeves up and get in there and find what the root of the weed is, right? What is the root? And it took me forever to find out, like, what was the root? What was the root? And so sharing that just because I think I've been through, and that's why I'm sharing it. It's like I've been pulling weeds for a while. I mean, gosh, from 10 to like, maybe a few years after 10, just because who knows what the heck I was going through my mind at 10 years old. But, probably, as you're developing your conscience, you start to realize, okay, there's some weeds. But I would just say, I've been a weed puller, for a while. And my fingers are bleeding. I'm kind of sick and tired of it. I don't want to just be pulling weeds all day. It sucks. It sucks to be outside just pulling weeds, right? Like, no one wants to do that. But here we are. We're weed pullers. What I really found out, I think, through recovery is in order to really fully be in recovery and to take porn out of your life, or to really, I would say, minimize like those negative effects, right? You have to find in your garden, what is the weed? And I learned, through counseling that there's trauma. There's trauma that you develop that maybe you don't even remember. There's trauma that might be deep down inside, that porn in some way or fashion was the solution to that. Porn was a way that you can hide from that. Porn was a way that you can numb the pain. That's a huge one for me, is numbing pain. It just kind of makes me feel blank. And maybe that's, sometimes I just needed that. I just needed to be blank. Porn for, I would say, some traumas, it might be to feel like they have that attention. Maybe feel like they have some power in their life, some control of their life. There's a lot of different, like emotions that are tied to porn. A lot of different things that we're going to be able to talk about, I think, in the next podcast as I create these. But I think this is a good starting point, because in my opinion, and just working through therapy and working with coaches, at the end of the day, like, you got to kind of get to the root cause. Like if you truly want to, live porn free, and it's not all just about porn, it's just to remove things from your life that aren't serving you a purpose. To remove things from your life that, you don't need, like you don't need it, right? And to remove things from your life that actually start causing a lot of pain. You really want to go down deep inside, and that could be, over time, maybe just something just to write down while you're listening or while you're watching is, what are some things like maybe in the past, this might be really tough. So I apologize for, kind of bringing this up, it might be a heavy topic for you, but it's important because, at least from my story, I mean, things blew up, life was going one way and then it completely went the other, like pretty fast, like went from being married and seeing family and everyone thought our marriage was great to like we're getting divorced, and oh my gosh, it's been so difficult. Like I can't even, it's hard to really put into words just how difficult it's been, like emotionally, on the body. It's like I feel it every day. It's only been 2 months. Gosh, it just feels like it just feels like you just get punched in the gut like every day. Just something hits you. So I'd hope that maybe sharing some of this stuff can help somebody out there that, maybe instead of making one decision, you make another that could hopefully change that trajectory to where maybe there can be constructive conversations if you're with a partner, hey, this is affecting, both people, but, the person that, has the porn, issue or, is having a hard time stopping. I think there can be empathy provided and there can be solutions. If we drop the defensiveness, if we drop the secrecy, and we say, hey, I've got something really deep down inside that I've never told you about, or, I've never really opened up about. Vulnerability is huge with this whole process, right? And I found, at least for me, that really helped. I mean, there were parts of my marriage where, I was, porn free for almost 2 years and doing really well. And, I think the vulnerability part helped, and like putting in the work, putting in the actions there. So that's like my garden analogy. Hope that made sense to you. But I think just to close that one off is, hey, you need to look at your own garden. Don't look at other people's gardens, right? Look at your garden. Don't look at your wife's garden, your husband's garden, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, whoever, right? You have to look inside of your garden first. They can look in their garden too, see what's going on. But start in your garden. All right. So that's story number A, analogy number A. We're going to go to B. So B, I want you to picture yourself on a beach. Hopefully that sounds like a beach. And you have a dream house. Beautiful. You put it right on the beach. Like, who would not want a house right on the beach? You probably have seen it before, like online. Like, there's some places like where you're like in the beach. You're in the water already, right? You can step out. You're there. I love to fish. From Colorado, love fishing, fly fishing in the rivers, kayaking, all that stuff. But man, oh man, the ocean is awesome. I love Florida. Actually going to go there in July. Yes, to do some fishing. But I mean, how can you go wrong with a house right on the beach, right? Okay, where are you going with this, Mac? Well, you'll see. So, yeah, I mean, I bought a house. It was like 2 years ago. So my wife and I bought this is the story. So basically, my wife and I bought a house. I was probably about like a year and a half, maybe close to 2 years sober, doing really well. Like I was in groups, like a men's group. I got done, with my sexual addiction therapist, and I was doing really well, feeling really confident, right? Overconfident, of course. And, we moved to a different city. So, basically a lot of the support groups that I had, completely disappeared. Like I didn't really have that anymore. I didn't have men's group I'd see for church every week. My sexual addiction therapist, like, family, friends. I was a little bit further away, right? But so excited that we got the house. Big accomplishment as the first house that I've ever owned. As a millennial, if you're listening, yeah, tough times out there, and for the younger generations. Not blaming if there's older generations listening, but holy moly, it's like should just be missing an arm and a leg right now. So, but anyway, so we get the house, and I think I kind of got just so in the motions with all this new stuff that I really kind of like lost my my sense of like routine, like what was working for me and all that. But I had this house on the beach, this beautiful house, beautiful view. I actually had a beautiful view of the mountains. But let's just say I'm on this house on the beach, and in this house, and this happened in real life, I actually had the idea. I said, hey, why don't you create a podcast? And why don't you create like a Substack where you can write some articles? Why don't you create like a Twitter account where you can tweet stuff? That'd be really neat. You could share your story with guys that are, going through marriage, maybe relationship issues, or women as well, right? And yeah, you can share that. You can write this. It's going to be great. Like you can share your story. It'll be really motivational because you can kind of show how a marriage, can really get strained. But hey, you kind of picked it up early. You picked yourself up. You put some good things into place, and you're doing great. So, guys and ladies, if you're listening, and sorry I keep saying that. I know it's mainly guys. I mean, that's normally who I talk to porn about. But I know there's women out there too that could be listening. So I don't want to exclude. But sometimes I might just say guys. I think I'm just conditioned. So I will continue to work to just make sure we're keeping it inclusive here. But anyways, so I make this. I actually built out the Substack. I got the name Porn Free Millennial. Was getting ready to do a podcast, all this stuff, right? Wrote out an article, I was ready to release it, was talking to my wife about it, and just just super pumped, like she was supportive. And it was like 2 or 3 weeks later, I had a massive relapse. And not to smile and make light of it, but it's just crazy. I'm like, holy crap, like I was right there. I was, this could have been me like two years ago, right? And this is like when our relationship was actually getting better. I was doing the things I needed to do. I was sober. I think I quit alcohol for about 8 months. Like it just felt great, right? And here I just fell right on my face. Just right on my face. So embarrassing, right? And guess what I did? I told her everything. No, I did not. I didn't tell her anything. And it was awful. Like I felt awful about it. I felt ashamed. I felt guilt. I'm like, how could I have done this? I'm not practicing what I'm preaching anymore. And I did like the worst thing that you could do. I just completely just buried it. Just said, hey, nope. She doesn't need to know about it. It's all good. I'll get right back on the horse. And that's like one of like the worst things that you can kind of do with like recovery. The best thing you can do is be honest about it and just be open and be vulnerable. I think if I would have done that, things might have turned out maybe a little bit differently. Still would have been tough, but I think the thing that hurt my ex the most, I think, was just the honesty part. Like I wasn't honest. I lied a lot. I never thought I was a liar. I never really imagined myself being like that. But truth be told, no pun intended, I lied a lot, and it all had to do around porn. I didn't lie about anything else really. It was porn. Like it all had to do with porn and hiding it and feeling ashamed about it and things related to porn, right? But that's just the kind of thing. It's like you're kind of living a double life. So it's like, where are you going like with this whole house analogy? Well, before I get there, real quick. So I have this big relapse. Then I go on a guy's trip that, in hindsight, not the best, I'd say, environment for like the only married man in the group to be on. Get back and, things just really blew up because we talked about the trip. And then I think I waited a few days and then told her about my relapse, which is just stupid. And I think that just really, all the trust that we were building over the last 2 years, it just was like, what the heck, man? Why did you do that? And there was a lot of hurt there, obviously, betrayal. And, that really, I think, kind of just started, just the beginning of the end, I think, just at least for our married relationship. And yeah, it's a personal thing I'm sharing. I don't, when I talk about my relationship, all of that with my wife, I'm never really going to go into like super personal stuff, of course, because that's not really appropriate. But I think just generally, like the theme of it, I hope you understand, is, we had a lot of things going well for us, and that part just kind of really hit into the intimacy. It hit into the trust. And, anyone that's married or in a relationship, I mean, trust is like the number one thing you need. And in my belief, I think porn is really like the antithetical to trust. It's like the complete opposite. Because you do it alone, you do it in isolation. Typically, you're putting on private mode, you're incognito, you're deleting your history. Hey, like, don't grab my phone. Don't look through my phone. Like, that's hiding things. And you don't want to hide something from the person you love. If you're single, I mean, you just don't want to hide things from people that you meet and try to build relationships with, right? It's just not a healthy way to interact with others. Like, truth and honesty, I mean, that's huge. And I mean, we talk the talk, right? But do we walk the walk? So I'm in the beach house, I'm writing, I'm ready to get my podcast. Everything looks great. And, little did I know, I built my house on the beach, not like off the beach, like on the beach. I kind of overlooked that one. And there's no foundation. It's just right on the sand. Kind of stupid when you think about it, but hey, it's on the beach. Well, you could probably guess what happens next. So, I'd say leading up to my relapse, there's, water started to creep in a little bit, started to come in. I didn't really notice. Oh, there's a little bit of water on the floor. Oh, not a big deal. I'm on a beach. Like, this is kind of, get what I'm paid for. Slowly, the water trickles in. Okay. And then, bam, giant wave. Just takes the house out. So the analogy is, don't build your house on sand. Build it on a foundation, right? Build your house. You can still have a house on the beach. I had a house on the beach. But in my mind, I built it on sand. I should have built it on some foundation, because then I could have had the best of both worlds. I could have had a house on the beach and something that could have lasted forever. But I don't. And I didn't. And, that's why I'm sharing my story. So, I would say, the takeaway from that one, like the garden, is have a foundation. And I would say, why I told you the story about writing like the Substack, and hopefully this all kind of loops in with you. But I was so close, right? I was so close to taking a really big step. Like, kind of in my mind, it was a big thing. Like, this is right now a big thing for my recovery. Because part of like what works with my recovery is talking to other people and sharing my story. For me, I have a sense of responsibility. I've always kind of had that, growing up, having like a little brother, siblings. Always wanted to be that role model for them. In high school, I was a captain of the basketball team. College, was in leadership roles on campus. In leadership roles, where I work right now. So I think it just kind of is a part of my character where if I know other people are kind of looking at me and maybe looking up to me or working with me, I try to just do my best in my actions, But in this aspect of my life, right, I didn't do the right thing with my actions, and that, at the end of the day, kind of cut into the core of who I was, and really, like, the marriage is like what kind of defined me as like the most important thing in my life, and it fell apart. And because, right, I built the house on sand. So a takeaway there, hopefully, for you. But those are really like the two things I wanted to talk about today is, just think about it. Think about, what's that weed in your garden? And how many weeds are in your garden? Are there like a ton of weeds, or are there just like a few? You can start to see them pop up. And if you really want to get those weeds out, you got to dig in the dirt a little bit. You got to find out where that root is, and then grab that thing and yank it out, right? And after that, make sure that no more weeds get in your garden. Second is, using our common sense, right? You can still have great things. You can still have romance. You can still have, attraction, intimacy, all of that. But just remember, do it on a good foundation. Do it on a house, that can still be on the beach, have great views, right? But do it on a house with foundation, not right on the sand. Because if a wave comes in, it's going to wreck you. And if a giant wave doesn't come in, those little ones do. Eventually it's going to wear out the wood. It's going to start to drip in. It's going to start to rot, smell, all that stuff. And eventually, right, that house is going to deteriorate. It's going to wash away. It's going to wash away everything that you built, worked hard for, cherished, loved. That's the way I feel about it. So to close out, I'll just leave you with this. If there's something that's in your mind, like it was for me to hey, I want to start this podcast. I want to do this thing. If it's been in your mind with porn, to say, hey, I want to take a step to, maybe get this out of my life, or maybe move on to something that's more positive. I would just challenge you to do like a little baby step. Do a little baby step forward, north. Not backwards, not standing still, but do a step forward. Do that. Something simple, but something that's moving you forward, right? You don't want to stand still. Because for me, when I stood still, the world ended, right? And now I'm on a new trajectory. I'm back on my feet. But it's a different world. It's a different world than I expected my life to go. So just wanted to leave you with all with that. Take action. Actions speak louder than words. I'm going to be writing on Substack. I'm going to be putting the links, where they're available. You can follow me on YouTube as well, TikTok, Twitter. You'll be coming out with some more content. I look to post at least a video like this, a podcast, long form, every Wednesday. That's my goal. But do look to, on Substack, add weekly tips, and then somehow kind of get that into a fun form on YouTube and TikTok. It's been a blast, making videos and just seeing people's reactions, and it's been really neat just to see others that might have the same opinions, or others that have different opinions but are still willing to to be a part of the conversation. I think that's pretty neat as well. So anyways, if you're still listening, my first podcast ever, so hopefully it wasn't boring, or I rambled on too much. But yeah, any feedback would be appreciated. I want to bring forward something that's tangible for you. But I hope you have a great rest of your week. Take action. Don't just talk about it. Little baby steps, all right? And keep fighting the good fight. Thanks, everybody. Bye.